So, yeah, Milena and I spoke about this topic quite a bit because it is something that is a really important topic for me. It's something that sorry, I'm just busy opening a thing. Because normally when I join an organization, I try to hide away the fact that I have quite a lot of experience with Jira administration. It never ever works for me because someone always finds out or shares it to the wrong person. Before I know it, I'm the Jira guy. Um, and at first, I used to resist it. And then eventually it became something that I found really, really valuable. And that's kind of what I want this talk to be about. Why am I jumping on that screen? By the way, this picture, is it making anyone get a little bit of anxiety? I see Elizabeth's nodding her head. Yeah. It normally does, right? Because Jira is a bloody mess. Sorry for the language. So maybe just put in the chat just so we can start off with a bit of engagement. I promise I'll let you eat your lunch afterwards. On a scale of 1 to 10, where 1 is the lowest and 10 is the highest, how would you rate your comfort levels with configuring Jira for a medium to large size organization? 1 to 1 to 10. Leonard. Well, yeah, 6. Yeah. Oh, nice range of experience. Okay. And I'm going to ask you another question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your framework knowledge? So, Scrum, Kanban, Safe. All right. So, if you've got a big difference between them, this is kind of what I'd like you to walk away with because, I could talk about this topic for hours, but I only have like quite a bit, not that much time. So I've whittled down this a lot. It's also first time I'm running this deck, so see it as a bit of a test. So any feedback is great. I wanted to focus on a first starting point that can take you away, that can maybe increase that score, that first one you gave by 1 point. After that, I want to drive and talk about this a lot more. So you'll probably see more videos from us and some articles, etc. Because this topic can go really deep really quickly, and there are some cool tools available, right? So normally I get the but Bevan. It says individuals and interactions over processes and tools. Does it not? We all know the manifesto pretty well. We know how it goes. We know what it's supposed to be. Um, but again, it doesn't say ignore the tools, right? It doesn't say ignore it. And the reality is that if Jira is messy, it becomes the process that we follow. And if we don't know how to change the tool, then it's going to define how we work, right? So again, this is where that question came up that says we invest a lot of time in processes, right? So think about the learning that you've done and certifications you've done around process and practice, and then extend it to say how much have you invested similarly in tools? Yeah. So let's kind of explore this a little bit, right? So some of you would be familiar with the spine model. Yeah. So the spine model is one that you would have seen in Milena's topic in the previous session as well. It's our go-to. It's just kind of why. So how do organizations go from we want to be quicker to market and we want to have better customer experience? How do they jump to Jira? Right. And we're now agile because we're in Jira and we're doing stand-ups. Right. So in the many years that I've worked with other agile coaches, the one consistent thing that's always run across is that Jira is not agile. And it is not. It is just a tool. Right. Sticky notes are not agile. It's just a tool. Right. And the more you start dissociating that, now you need to start connecting that to the value. So the way I like describing or using the spine model is to say we can go from the top left down to the bottom to describe our direction, our intent. Where do we want to go, right? What is it that we're trying to actually drive? But here's the thing, we can't think our way to new behavior. So how do we know that we're actually getting closer to solving that need? Well, we need to do something, right? In its simplest metaphor, I could say, imagine that your need is doctors told you that you've got a terminal illness unless you go and do a whole bunch of exercise or something, right? Or cut out salt is a very common one. You can't just jump to being like, I'm going to cut out salt, because if something that you hold on to, your values, principles, is saying, I really love flavor, you won't be able to cut it out as easily, right? But how do you know whether you're progressing towards that goal? You need to be able to see something. Maybe you get an app that tracks how much salt you're having every day based on the meals you eat. No, I'm just making it up. If you wanted to become healthy and run a marathon as a goal, um, how do you get there? It's not by, focusing on the things that you value and principle alone. It's to say, how do I integrate the tools and practices with my principles and values, right? So again, just like we use the Agile Manifesto value where we say, the processes and tools that we use should support the individuals and interactions. Likewise, our tools and our practices should be supporting the mindset and the thinking approach that we'd like to have so that it solves the actual problem, right? So this is what we want to, this is why I always get a little bit excited about tools, not only because I'm a nerd, I promise. So let's jump into measuring what matters. So again, just to keep the conversation, or at least my side of the conversation, shorter, so we can have some time for some Q&A. I want to focus on these three metrics. So when we look at the broad range of metrics that are available out there for Agilists to measure, I like to start simple, right? Let's get something that tells us that we're delivering, so throughput / velocity. Something that tells us that we're getting faster and more effective, right, or efficient, lead and cycle time. And something that tells us that we're actually heading in the right direction. So we're not just going really quickly into a brick wall, right? So how do we kind of bring this all together? So before we go into that, there are some basics that I would like to cover. So just these are concepts and little pictures that I'm going to use throughout. So I don't want to lose you, hopefully, in the language. And some good feedback points, if you want to look out for that, is to let me know if I was good at simplifying some of the language, because I can tend to not do that. And that's something I'm looking to improve. Um, so let's start here. Scrum Masters, Agile Coaches. Do you know how your team delivers value, right? So before we get into any tools, before we do anything else, it's always starting off by just kind of ideating, drawing. I think Kanban refers to it as Gemba. Go out there and measure how work gets things. From the moment that a customer has an idea or someone in your business has an idea, what are the steps that it takes to actually say, we've now realized that value? So what does this mean for our talk? Well, this is what Jira refers to as a workflow, right? So I'm going to try my best not to get too deep into the technical, but enough that you know what to bug your admin about. So here's a workflow. Workflow is just the representation of from the beginning to the end. So from open to done, right? And then steps in between. The one that I've got on the screen here is actually, you'll see it says the word all everywhere. That's what Jira calls a simplified version. But it also means that anyone that has project admin access can actually go in and change it however they want, infinitely customizable. That's not always a good idea if you work in a large organization. So what tends to happen in large organizations is they tend to create a bit of structure that says, No, you need a flow from analysis to design, and then from design to development. These transitions, these things between them, are also incredibly customizable. As agilists, our encouragement is always to say, how do we keep this as simple as possible? Because if a tool can do anything you want, someone will go and do everything, right? It's like I've seen some things in my time looking at Jira instances, and what you need to do to help keep this balance, right? Because it's a balance between, alignment and autonomy, or, control and autonomy. Is if you give everyone free autonomy, then they can just make their own stuff up all the time. How do you run enterprise-wide statistics? How do you look at where across the organization is it a team-specific problem with regards to the workflow versus a more systemic one, right? So again, it's a balance. There's no perfect answer. It's going to be what people are, what people can start on and then grow together. That's one. So now we know workflow. Good. We're going to use that a lot. It's the workflow, and the next one is very important to remember for anything with Jira and metrics. Quick one. You saw I had a done status, right? So that's our definition of done. Yeah. In Jira, our definition of done is determined by, and folks, please bear with me here, the rightmost column configured on your board. The rightmost column configured on your board. So why does it not automatically just take that done status? Maybe let me push it back to all of you. Who here has a team in your organization that is able to deliver across this full step in one sprint, all the way to done? It's like literally in production, customers using it, done within one sprint. Who's doing that? Yeah, I'm not seeing any hands. No, no thumbs
Bevan,
ups.
my question would be, how long is that sprint?
Doesn't matter.
Because if it's 6 months, yes.
But that is not a sprint. Yeah. So I am working on, the definition of a sprint being less than a month, right? So, but the realities of most of the organizations is that that's what we want to build towards. Most organizations are starting like, man, one of the organizations that I did work with was like their sprints were a quarter at a time. Um, so yeah, and they still wouldn't get to that. But so how do we actually create a bit of balance that allows us to meet an organization where they are? And this is where things start diverging with boards and workflows. Because if a team is able, if the answer to my question really was yes, then your board and your workflow is the same. Most organizations have something like this, right? Within a sprint, we can maybe complete our testing, but we can only get as far as a UAT environment, right? Because we can't necessarily release it into production unless there's pen testing or there's some kind of governance thing or compliance. I don't know. There's a whole bunch of interesting factors that happen between completion of work and integration testing and then actually getting it out into the market. Yeah, there's a good point, Maya. So some companies also only start from development, not necessarily from analysis as well, right? So the boards are there to represent your kind of flow. So um, there is a misunderstanding, and it's caused by Jira. So let's put blame where it needs to be. Scrum boards versus Kanban boards. Folks, don't let the tool tell you how to work. Go through the craft of the naming and realize it as they're both technically Kanban because it's visual like boards, but one is fixed time iteration and reporting, and the other one is work tracking. So both of those are just visible layers on top of a board. But in Jira, it says if you choose a Scrum board, I'm going to allow you to look at this workflow and say, you know what? Maya's team can go from development to release, right? Or development to done in one sprint. So you would configure your board accordingly, which means that the things that are in analysis and design don't necessarily go on your board. They're just a thing that you can do. If you're one of the teams that just has a definition of done that's, there, you can just make your rightmost column whatever your last step is, right? And this becomes important because when Jira calculates things like velocity or burn down or any of those, nice things that are available in the tool, it uses the rightmost column as burn down, not the status. So a lot of people don't realize that level of autonomy that you actually get with the tool. So while organizations can, and sometimes do quite often, for good reason, lock the workflow, the team still have customizability on their board. It comes with responsibility. So as Scrum Masters, Agilists, if you're working with a team that does this, just know that if you're only covering part of the workflow, right, then you're going to need another view that shows end to end. So this is why if you want to say, I want to view just a high level workflow in Jira, that would be a Kanban board, right? And you just say, give me everything. Then you're going to say, but our team works and plans in sprints, and the sprints cover development to testing, right? Or development to done. And we want to actually track the burn down. So we're going to have a sprint board that just shows these steps. And any analysis and design, that work will just be done as part of the Kanban board. Right. So again, it's just how do we want to visualize this information? And the moment you see that, you realize the workflow, underlying back end, and the boards are just a wrapper on top. How do I want to visualize that single source of truth? I'm going to give you some time for questions at the end. But what I would like you to do is, as these questions emerge, just kind of ping me, because I want to jump into some of the metrics next. So boards and workflows, two important things, because for those three metrics, this is what we're going to have to refer to. So if you know how those things work underlying, you can then get into very technical stuff as well. And let's talk about throughput and velocity. Throughput will be the amount of work completed in a fixed period of time. Velocity is the amount of work that meets the team's definition of done in a sprint, right? So planned work, right? So how much planned work can we complete in a fixed period of time? So I think it's one of those things where Agilists generally have a broad amount of opinions and experiences with this. I'm going to share mine because I've got the mic. Your team will do their estimation, whatever it may be. When they get an unplanned piece of work in, right? So something that was added after a sprint has started. I tell teams not to estimate it with story points, because the value of story points by the time you started a sprint has kind of fallen away, right? Because we've already said that if it's in the top of the backlog and it's in a sprint, yeah, that's important. Who cares what the estimate is, right? So when you look at it, you might do a form of investigation that says, look, I'll spend half an hour on it, and then I'll know, is this a sprint disrupting item, right? So does it impact our goal? Do we need to cancel the sprint with the product owner? Or is it something I can just complete on the side? And if so, what comes out, right? That trade-off negotiation conversation. But from a velocity perspective, whether you're using number of items completed, so the hashtag no estimates approach, or you're using the actual story points, which most teams tend to be doing, you just want to look at that difference. So how do you do this in Jira? Well, Jira has a nice little velocity chart, right? It has a nice velocity chart. And the velocity chart will show you exactly what you've defined as our team's definition of done. So at the beginning of a sprint, we can look at how many story points we had planned. So that's your little gray block. And then at the end of the sprint, when you close it, it says, well, these are the ones that got to the rightmost column in your board, right? See what I did there. And then it can calculate an average. Yeah. So from this information, you'll notice that you at a team level can start creating predictability metrics as well, right? So you see there's the planned now, we've got throughput, and now we can start creating complex metrics as well. So that's why if you start with the basics, you can extend. The next question people generally ask is, well, Bevan, how do we do throughput then when there are different definitions? So for the teams that can go end to end, velocity is throughput. For the ones that can't, how do we then measure throughput? Right? Well, you can go and look at your Kanban, right? So if you've got a workflow or a board that represents the full workflow, it's the same thing. How many items measured, met the definition of done or got to the done status in a period of time? And again, that could be done through queries or dashboards, right? So yeah, a couple of options available there as well. But having that data is the first start and understanding of how I can pull that data. So one of the things that drives, I know most of the people on this call probably feel the same way, velocity is not a productivity metric, right? So, so if you want to be able to explain why that's different, well, cool, if you're using story points, we all know it's made up, but productivity isn't determined by just the part of the sprint. Productivity is a much broader conversation. And for that, we'll actually need the next set of metrics as well, if productivity is a big thing that an organization is looking at. Just some considerations. This is your, take a screenshot of its slide, like a summary slide kind of thing. Just remember that definition of done for a team is the rightmost column. And higher numbers don't mean higher productivity, right? So especially if you're using story points, you can make them up. Even if you're using issue counts, you can just make them really, really, really micro tiny. So remember, velocity is for the team because it's an internal metric. It's, hey, how good are we at planning? And by good, I mean, how predictable are we in our planning, right? Are we able to show the impact of uncertainty? And then throughput is for the system itself, right? So the system as in the human system, the organizational system, and then the actual Jira tool system as well, right? How do we measure that? Let's look at lead and cycle time. So going back to our same kind of picture, here we go. Here's some examples of cycle times. So cycle times is it can be defined as a subset of the workflow, a single step in the workflow, or it'll just be across what most people have is at its simplest definition is the moment we start doing some work on it till the moment we're done doing work on it. That will be the cycle time. And then the lead time is just the extension of that says how long does it work, like wait essentially as well before we start working on it. So from the moment that someone puts the request in, the moment that someone has the idea to the moment that they actually receive it. I always love using this question when I have to explain this to people that are new to it. Let's do a fun little engagement thing quick in the chat. Or you can unmute yourself. You're back in high school. Your English teacher gives you 2 weeks to write an essay. When do you write your essay?
Day before
Night
you
before.
date.
Night before. You're the night before, it's the night before. Okay, now next question, following question. How long did it take you to write that essay?
3 hours.
3 hours. Anyone say different?
Yeah, quick. And make the plan.
And folks, it took you 2 weeks to write that essay. It took you 2 weeks. Why? Because your teacher asked for it 2 weeks ago, right? So this is the importance of lead time, right? We're focusing our customers and we're saying the moment you create something in a backlog, right? If someone comes to the product owner and says, this is a change I'd like to make, and the product owner says, sure, I'll put that in the backlog, right? The timer starts in that customer's head. on that stakeholder's head. And they go, when is this going to get done? They don't care about the other priorities if they're not communicated. If you only start working on it in 6 months and then 3 months down the line it gets done, they're going to go, why did it take you 9 months to complete this? So there we go. Use ChatGPT. Ah, cool. So let's talk about how we lead in cycle time. There is no nice way to say this, but it's going to require some manual work. All right, so if you want to go back and refer to Milena's previous chat and the slides that she did, she shows you how to manually calculate this. So I'm going to go on the assumption that you can find that. Milena will maybe share the link as well. So the control chart can look very confusing. But if I could out myself a little bit more as a nerd here, it's my favorite report in Jira. It really is. I freaking love this report. It is so useful to me, but it took some time to get used to it. And I had to play with it and I had to break it and I had to mess around with it a little bit. And it was actually really, really cool. So how the control chart works is that it looks at the history item of Jira. So any single time a status is changed on a work item, so whenever it transitions forward or backwards or whatever it may be, it logs it as a timing, right? And then this view allows you to take your workflow, right? So not just your board, your actual workflow, and select what information are you capturing. So essentially filtering the work items to say for the items that have gone through these statuses, how long have they been in there? And then from this, you can see that the average amount of time. So this screenshot here is actually cycle time. So from the moment work starts to the moment it ends. If I include lead time, this red line jumps to just above 60, right? Which is quite fun because it's the live data. Anyway, you can see the dates are pretty current. But that tells you the average is 3 weeks, 3 days, but the median is 1 week, 4 days. What does that tell me? There's outliers, right? Unfortunately, there's no way to exclude the outliers. So these ones where it's close to zero, someone forgot to update their ticket. So when they finished it, they were like, ooh, whoops, and they clicked it all the way to done. That happens a lot. And this is why the average and standard deviation is important. So for me, if I look at this data, this massive amount of blue shaded tells me that this data is not very accurate in that there's too much variation. Some people are updating regularly, some people are not. But it looks like it got a little bit better there, and then a bit worse, and then a lot better as well. So that's kind of what we want to be looking at. We can also see cool things like maximum time, and wherever you see these circles, you can actually go and find which particular item it is. So again, practice, get in there, look at real data, start figuring out where things go. If you really want to unpack it, all the data that's used for this is actually in each Jira ticket. You can actually jump into it and then go and look under the history drop down. But where the comments are, you'll see there's a little work log in history, and you can double check it to say, okay, this is when it was created, this is when it was moved to there and there and there, and get familiar with it. All right. If that sounds time consuming, good. Remember the first time you had to look at save. Same thing. Um, everything feels uncomfortable when it's new. So what do we do with this? What are the things that I want you to snapshot and take away? Is the data's there. Cool, the way of pulling it out is not great, but it is there. So make sure you select all workflow statuses, including to-do or backlog or whatever that first one is to measure lead time. And then for cycle time, just whatever you want to do. So we've gone as far as saying, I want to know what the cycle time is for development, for testing, for analysis, and then using that as, useful information. From that, so again, remember, just like with throughput velocity, where you could extend that to predictability, same thing with lead and cycle time. You can extend this to efficiency. right? You can extend it to the efficiency of your system, right? Which is essentially the work time versus your waiting time, right? So you can calculate the waiting time of our workflow. So let me just go back to that, because these are all work states. So luckily for us, the waiting time is just the difference between the lead and cycle time. Nice and easy. Cool. So then it's work time versus waiting time. How efficient is our system, right? You could get a little bit more granular to say, well, what if we wanted to actually measure waiting time? So a more traditional 2-column type Kanban system, right? With the in progress done. So there's analysis and analysis done. There's design and design done. Development done. And we set up a pull system and we can actually measure the time in each status. So how many times does it get stuck where analysis and design is done, but it is waiting for development? How many times are we done with the development, but it sits in dev done, waiting for testing to pick up, etc. So again, if you get the basics, then you can always expand on your knowledge of the actual framework of the practices and then say, well, now I know what to do in the tool, because then I know what to measure. Right, last metric to speak on, and this one is probably the most soapboxy of them all, because this isn't a standard. This isn't something that everyone measures, although we always talk about it. So I have a strong proposal on how to do this, right? So here I'm defining value as it's the outcome delivered, right? So that could be things like revenue generation, cost saving, customer satisfaction, all these different complex criteria that comes out in for value, right? The one consistent thing I've seen in every single organization is that the business leads themselves, so product owners, business owners, whatever you want to call them, can never agree on value. So they disagree on value a lot more than development teams disagree on estimates. So that should give you a clue as to the recommendation, right? Which is, it's an estimate, make it up, right? Do you know how much value something is going to return before you've built it? No, you don't. Absolutely not, right? But could we look at, hey, as a product owner, I've prioritized this subset of work to be the top that goes into the next sprint. If we are predictable with our effort estimations, are we predictable with some of the value that we deliver? So can we start changing our story that says, hey, instead of we delivered 200 points this sprint, and having to describe that, we can say, hey, we actually increased the amount of value that we delivered from last time, and this is how it's grown by this percentage. All right, so it changes the narrative quite a bit. Is it 100% accurate? Is it really how much value we added? No, so there's still work of measuring that, right? So I'm not going to go into that one just yet, because that's where like OKRs and all those kind of fun things come in. But for now, just do Fibonacci, right? One of my favorite activities is, especially when you're working with scale teams where you've got multiple product owners and teams working together, it's to just get them in a room and get them to do estimation, planning poker, whoop, but with value, right? And sometimes even simpler, because you can make them do silent affinity estimation. In other words, here's an item, put it over there. This is the middle. Take the next one. Is this one more valuable or less valuable than the one on the board? And they're going to go, well, no, it's more valuable. Why? What makes it more valuable? Now they can have a conversation, right? It's very much the same as story points. Do we have a shared understanding of the value and why this item is ordered or prioritized where it is? So my little point here is that if you're not measuring value, you're just measuring busyness. So as Agilists, it is important, it's crucial for us to be able to show that the team is there to deliver value, not just deliver story points. And because that, yeah, in my experience, has been a tough thing to drive throughout the organization. So what within the tool do you have available to you to help with this? There's a whole bunch of custom reports, there's dashboards you can create, but then it does get into a little bit more of the advanced stuff, which is just kind of part of your journey, right? So just like you will start learning more advanced techniques around coaching, around facilitation, around things, I would encourage you to understand how Jira's native query language works. And then how you can customize dashboards, just to kind of give you some of this information. The quicker that people can see the information and the more they can see it, the higher likelihood there is of things getting improved. And this is, yeah, I guess something that was my why of this talk is that I've not met a lot of Agilists that are able to really nicely articulate the metrics that they have. So why is velocity such a common productivity metric, right? There's so many Scrum Masters. How is it still a thing? And again, it could be power dynamics, it could be all these different things, but are we able to tell the story around delivery and metrics? So I'll put this picture in here because again, this is a live actual thing. I'm not going to say which one, because there might be people here that can figure it out, but this is from a tool called Atlassian Analytics. So again, if you go down the nerd track of Atlassian, they have their own BI tool that has direct access to the database. So that makes people like me very happy, but it also means that the data we can run, we can create much better visuals. So I didn't take a screenshot of their whole thing because then, well, you'll figure out who they are. But it was just to show you that we can actually build custom dashboards that are live to anyone in the business to go and take a look at and say, over this time period, oh, by the way, this is over 8 PIs that they've run. And if you compare it from when they were the first, they're pretty much half their cycle time, right? Efficiency of 66% is because there's still that waiting time that's happening before picking things up. And that's pretty typical for a large organization. And then, of course, how many actual features were completed in that time, right? So there's always ways that we can access that. So what's in the rest of the data is same thing with the value thing. How much value, estimated value, did we deliver, right? Next up, how do we tie in other data and bring it in? Understand how the tool is tracking or creating this data. We won't be able to create dashboards like this. So whether you're the person that is the administrator going and creating this, or you know who to ask, right? So Milena is the one who knows who to ask, and I'm the one that goes and it's together. That's why we work so well together, right? Different strengths. I actually really spend my evenings doing that and building roads, but that's another conversation. So if you must, I'd like to say it this way, is that you call yourself a Scrum Master because you're intended to be the master of Scrum. So Scrum defines a bunch of, principles on top there. It should be the same with our tools, right? If we really want to connect our ways of working that into something that people can visually see and track the behavior and almost identify the value of our role, right? We need to be able to get the right data and do it in tools that companies already have in place, so meet them where they are. But then it's also the story that we tell with them, right? How do we make sure that the definitions of these things are aligned to what they should be? How do we break the typical velocity must be increased and everyone on the team must have the exact same velocity and normalize that? How do we break that if we can't tell the story? So this is where, yeah, master the tool, master the story. Yeah. So I believe, and very much like Milena said in the previous talk, is that the whole point of intent-based coaching is that we have metrics and outcomes and we can show value rather than talk about it. And that is why I believe that any Agilist that masters tools or goes on certifications for processes, practices, and the people stuff as well, should just include tooling to that list. So before we go into questions, one little recommendation, I'll actually, I'll add it afterwards. I'll put in the chat. Atlassian actually has a really, really good library of free training that you can access. They've got a free tier, so for you to practice on. And most organizations are not as strict as they really should be for admin access, especially if they're good and they've got a sandbox environment, one that you can break. And then go in and start playing around. Yeah. And if not, how can you work with someone? So again, I'm not going to say everyone has to do it. It's, follow your passion. How can you connect with someone that is aware or understands the technical nuance that allows you to get the information you need? That would be my kind of call to action question there. Let's go to questions.
Yes, Bevan. Simba.
Hey, Simba, how's it
Can you,
going?
good man, can you come back to that value calculation? I think that's the most important thing for me right now. The one where there
Yeah.
were numbers, that one. Yes.
Yes, again. Yeah.
So, so question is like the way that we're measuring value, we're using outcomes objectives. So obvious, I would say like I've done 20 objectives or 30 objectives, but it's because my features are not proper features. So I bastardize something. How do I bring that back into tally? Like what I'm doing right now, I'm saying this was the initiative, these are the objectives fulfilled. Then I bring in the velocity as the throughput and the feature count as the output to tally the stories. But using mathematics, like what you do, how do I tally those in? Do I still use the issue count on the objectives as my count of value? How do I do it?
Yeah. Look, so if you're using the safe recommendation, which is don't commit or assign business value to functionality, so output, assign it to the outcomes that are being driven, right? So number one, not many companies are doing that really, really well. Not again, it's not a judgment, it's just nice. It's a opportunity for us, right? But number two is if you've got outcomes information as opposed to output information, I would rather measure that than the output. Because the output means nothing if it is or isn't achieving the outcome. So if you're using outcomes, again, probably one of the most common ones at the moment to be using is OKRs, right? And again, if you're using it and you want to learn how to use it effectively, I have to plug Agile Training Alliance. There's a really nice short course you've got available for that. But on that is exactly that, is if you do that well, you have defined what success looks like. You have said, this is what we're trying to achieve, and this is how we're going to measure that we've actually achieved it. What you do is essentially saying, we're scientists, these are the experiments we're going to run to see if we can meet this outcome. Did we meet this outcome? No, we didn't. What are we going to try next? Right? So that's how it should work. That's how it should work. If it's not working that way, it's again, how do we get one step closer to that? And that's why if you're able to shift the metrics away from the work item, so again, not measuring busyness, but measuring that value, then that's quite valuable. So that's why, like even Safe would say very deliberately, we don't commit to the work, we commit to the outcomes. Similar to in Scrum, we don't commit to the backlog, the sprint backlog. We commit to the sprint goal, right? So the outcome, not the thing, because that's where variability comes in. Because if you commit to the work, then essentially what you're saying is we're going to fix time because it's fixed time cadence or iteration. We're going to fix cost because it's the same team and a set of people. So resource cost the same. Yes, I use resources. And then we're also going to fix scope because now we've committed to a plan of output, right? And again, that from project management iron triangle means that the only fourth criteria to drop is quality. Right, so that's why it's always useful to be able to separate those. But for me, again, like with the estimate around size, you're not looking for accuracy. You're not looking for the right answer. You're looking for a shared understanding of the answer, right? Yeah. Okay.
Cool. Thanks,
What
man.
else? No worries. No worries. What else? What's the biggest challenge with Jira you've experienced?
Hi, Bevan.
Hey, Vinny.
I, I guess so strange seeing you all wrapped up and I'm hot.
Don't
Um,
let it in.
I guess the biggest challenge I've seen with tooling is the little knowledge can be quite dangerous. Leaders don't want they don't want to know, they don't want to learn. It's the little thing that you know, and you can just find something to blame, and you can just say, right, this is it.
Yeah.
I guess a lot of these things are systemic issues that are not going to change overnight. And Agile, Scrum Mastery, whatever, it's just a really quick blame, and until people take responsibility for their decisions and their actions, and the willingness to learn, it's always been misuse. And I feel this is the gripe with our community, how we say that we don't like Jira. Tools are important, they actually tell the story. Until
Yeah.
people don't want to accept and have some humility, we will still be sitting here having this
Yep.
conversation.
Yeah, spot on. Yeah, that's the if you don't master the tools, the tool will master you, right?
Yeah.
And that's the thing is, I yeah, because I've been working for so long, like I see it as that. I'm like, for me, Excel is more complex than Jira. But thanks to ChatGPT, I have an Excel project that I can just go and ask for help. I have to keep reminding it that I'm on Mac, and then it goes, "Ooh, that feature's not available on Mac for Excel for Mac." I was like, "Wow." Anyway, um, yeah, just a really good point. Yeah, the one reframe or the one different perspective I want to bring in is just from how the last few years, yeah, system wide has been quite a lot, right? So some of you on the call are in that same system. Many of you know that system. It's not that people don't want to learn, it's that they don't want to learn this. So people have a limited capacity for what they're going to be investing learning time in. And, Jira and Agile, in this day and age, can you imagine an exec admitting that they don't know what the hell Agile is? It's like, where have you been for the last 30 years, right? So there is a genuine risk for them as a person to admit that they need that learning. So how else could we provide it for them in a safe manner? Yeah. So same thing with Atlassian with the tool set is not everyone admits that they don't know it, right? But what are we doing to find the right people that do and learn from that? But it is always easier to blame. Always easier to blame, right? It makes us feel good about something, but it doesn't actually solve anything.
So Bevan, before that was a very good talk and presentation. I thoroughly enjoyed it. What advice can you share for us in terms of any success stories that you've had in making the shift with leaders, teams, and maybe Scrum Masters or product people?
Um, it's from change management, just communicate. So remember, people's memory is all made up of the experiences, right? So you want to control the narrative. Oh man, that sounds so. I've been in corporate too long. But you do. You essentially want to control that narrative. You want to ensure that the version of tooling that's going out into the organization is aligned to your version of tooling, which is it is a tool, right? That's it. Here's the process. This is how the tool supports the process. And that's the part for me that I think is missing. So I think in the current organization that I'm in, we've had some incredible successes. We've had some absolute failures as well. But the parts where it succeeded in this organization and previous organization is that when we're able to connect the information and the observable artifacts that leaders are looking at to the practices that we're doing. So, and then above that, the why. How does it connect to their actual problem statement, right? So I find myself for the last 2 or 3 years, at least every single week, someone's like, why are we even using Jira and Jira Line? It's so complex, it's so complicated. We should be using a whiteboard. And then I have to go back to the original reason what we started that says, okay, we've got an enterprise with multiple groups that cannot define or have a single definition of something like a feature. What it means in one place means something else. What it means there means something else. That we have entire parts of the organization with large budgets where there is no visibility of their work. And one of the big things that we did to uncover that was really cool is when we started connecting these things, we picked up that there was a very large project that was being reported on manually that was on no one's backlog, right? Why? Because we're not aligned as organizations. And this, I've seen it, small organizations of like 10 people all the way up to tens of thousands of people, where we make the assumption that we're aligned instead of actually just checking. So I like to see it as the tool is my X-ray machine, just like we say with Scrum. It's my thing. It says, here we go. Here's how I'd like to see this data. What does it look like? But we always start outside the tool because otherwise people get all caught up in the complexities of where do I click rather than activating their brains. So now you get to use your fun little individuals and interaction skills, which is facilitation. Say, come, let's go draw it. What happens here? What needs to happen there? Okay, now I know how to do it in the tool. Let me go test it. Does this look about right? Does this match your expectation? What about that? Okay, now we've created that thread from why to what I see. And that's what actually changes behavior, in my opinion, is when people can actually see change rather than just hear about it. Yeah. Okay, I'll get off my soapbox now. Fine. Anything else? Cool.
Also,
So-
say thank you, Bevan. Or do you want to add something? I didn't want to
No,
interrupt.
I just wanted to say that, yeah, thank you very much for listening to me ramble. And I would love any feedback. So I didn't set up a feedback form or anything like that. But you're welcome to put it in the chat if you want to do it privately as well. You send a direct message or just chat on LinkedIn. Yeah, some of you haven't seen it in a while. The other thing is just that, so what's next? Because I had to cut down so much content. So I've started putting it into like a blog or probably going to be a few blogs. But if there are specific things that emerge after this, once your brain has had a chance to reflect, that are questions, send them through because then, if there's a way that I can help or share experience, I'd love to be able to share that. So I really do invite you for that.
Thank you,
So,
Ben. Lena, you said there in the chat, what topics would you like to hear more about? So, Bevan, you're saying you cut out a lot of what you could share. Could you share in another meetup more of what you didn't share? Because this was quite insightful. It's a different way to think about story points and value and metrics.
Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, so I've got so you know what I'll do? Part of the follow-up we'll send, because you'll see there's a recording, we'll share the recording, but there's another recording, is a talk that I did for the company I'm working at the moment. That was a partner talk with the head of engineering on how we're busy rolling out Jira Line, which is now trying to bring in the entire business into a tool set. So yeah, we can talk more about that as well. So that is a thing, because now we're looking at enterprise metrics as opposed to just delivery metrics, right? So now we're looking across objectives, literally going to group executive scorecards and trying to measure whether they're actually achieving their goals or not. So it's probably been the most ambitious tooling rollout I've ever done. So yeah, we'll build more topics on that as the inspiration hits. But if there's specific questions, specific practical things, then yeah, put it in there. If I've got a pattern or something, I'd be more than happy to share it.
One thing is sure, I see the comment of appreciation of the practical approach me and Bevan take. That's what we normally famous for. So this meetup is a practical approach to everything of our topic. We don't like theoretical. We like to share of our experience and what we've been doing. So yeah, me and Bevan have other thinking also, but definitely we can go more into this. I'm so glad that people resonate with it. I have been pushing Bevan quite some time now, hey, for this talk.
Yeah.
Please let us know, and I hope you enjoyed today. We have 1 minute left. I have two things to say. Firstly, we are an official Scrum Alliance user group, which means you can get SU points and all of that if you register for the hour. In the future, we'll try to get the links so it's easy for you to get them. And then secondly, please, spread the voice about our meetup. We'd love to get more people to attend. So we feel it's valuable. And when you all say this, so please help us to spread the word. And one last thing, we are here to help you guys, which meaning what topic comes up for you? What do you want to learn about? I know that seems like you never know what you don't know, right? We'll definitely try to, but if there's something you come up like, I have an issue with Jira like this, I have an issue with this technique, give it to me and Bevan. That's what our meetup is about. It is to make it practical for you instead of the theoretical approaches. We have combined a lot of experience, so we will always share the topics between us. Feel free.
And also to build onto that, the answer can never ever be, well, just get rid of Jira. Because that seems to be a go-to. It's like, get rid of Jira, get rid of Save. It's not our decision, right? It's never our decision, an organization. So how do we influence that decision making? How do we provide other information, or how do we work with what we have or what the organization has to get there? So yeah, like Robin, that's your question triggered that as well. So yeah, I do have to think about that though, because my first answer is take over admin rights. Hostile takeover. But
You
it's
cannot answer, June.
But
You
I
cannot
think
answer your own
me,
question.
I think me and Bevan always also do when we go in with this is always, why are we doing it? And that's a conversation, especially with the rollout that Bevan also referred to, was to understand, no, we're not here for doing more reporting. Why should the team update the tickets? That's another big thing, right? People don't update the tickets. Understand what is actually the benefit for them. That is also the trick to get Jira to work. And one thing we actually had, now I'm sharing from a team both me and Bevan was on, now we're going over time. A little bit of an insight. Me and Bevan were both part of a team once where we were forced to use Jira. We were team members, hey, it was a transformation team. And none of us could actually understand, why do we have to do it? Sometimes the why actually came down to this scenario because the company is asking for this report. So yes, it didn't have a direct benefit to us, but again, create transparency. Why do we need this data? Maybe it is to help a different colleague of yours. So really dig into that whole thing. Why are we actually doing it? Is it a waste or is it actually beneficial? But we came down to is, but do we then have to have all the details in there? No, we don't. And it's those conversations you want in your team.
Yeah, I'll have to tell you the cool story there of how we do PI planning and sprint planning using Confluence, whiteboards, right? Because it's got a direct link to Jira. It works well. But then also plans, because you've got the advanced roadmap premium version, you get plans that you can do sprint planning, and it's really cool. Anyway, we'll do a show and tell one day so you can see some fun stuff. But yeah, I've got to run because I'm jumping back into some training stuff.
Thank you all for your time. I hope this was valuable, and we hope to see you all again
Lovely to see you
next
all.
month.